shifting bits, making hits. We're on the podcast. Let's get lit.
What bits are we shifting?
The bits.
The bit shift. It's a bit shift. It's a function that you can do in programming.
Oh, there you go. Monday night's a great night for podcast.
Yeah, but they don't know we record on a Monday.
Maybe they listen on a Monday.
Maybe they listen on a Monday. Yeah, mate, there you go.
Well, we don't record on a Monday. I'm just not that into
Mondays.
I'm not that into Mondays. There you
It's
go.
a Garfield.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I hate Mondays. OMG. OMG, the podcast is on. You ready for this, Sam?
Welcome to I'm Just Not That Into Games. This week we're going to do something a little bit different to what we normally do. I'm going to spend this episode going through the top 5 games of 2017 that I played. You know, just for a bit more of a freeform approach. A lot of our other episodes we have more dedicated editing to get it tight and short and simple. So this one's going to probably seem a little bit rambly in comparison. So Andy has kindly let me rant about my 5 top games that I played in 2017. And in return, I've decided to let him talk about his top 5 Newcastle moments.
Excellent, and I'm looking very much forward. I mean, Sam, I think you shouldn't be too harsh on us. We have actually got 2 very distinct top 5 lists, so we have got a fair bit of structure here.
I don't think there'll be any overlap between these 2 lists in particular.
You know what, Sam? You're just not that into football, but just like I have had my eyes opened about certain aspects of the gaming world.
Don't you mean soccer?
Yeah, well, soccer.
All right, boys. Now.
All right. Well, I'll tone it down a little. This top 5 list is going to be the games that I played in 2017, and as a result, some of them are games that were released in 2016 and maybe 2015, if you got it that way. So, yeah.
And as everyone who follows football knows, the European football seasons actually span 2 years, so you'll have a 2016-2017 season. I'll just be talking about the 2017 calendar year, which encompasses the second half of the 2017-2016 season and the first half of the 2017-2018 season. I can see you rolling your eyes, Sam, but it's important details for the listeners. I would hate for them to get confused.
I mean, it's the most important thing of this podcast, I'm sure.
And also, it must be mentioned that Newcastle probably don't have enough highlights for this season alone, so that's why we had to delve back to last season.
Yeah.
I'm going, you know what? I'm going to ignore that because...
Because it's true?
Oh, well, I think that's as good a place as ever to get into it.
Well, let's kick things off, Sam, with your number 5 game for 2017.
All right, so number 5 was the hardest one to place because number 1 to 4 was pretty easy. There were some real shockingly good games this year. And some terrible games as well because, hey, the games industry is what it is. My number 5 was Quadrilateral Cowboy, which was a game released in 2016. This was a game released by Blendo Games, which is definitely a small indie studio that they release games every now and then with a similar sort of artistic style, and they try to do lots of weird and interesting things with their games. They're kind of short and simple, but you know, very well executed, very, very solid ideas. Quadrilateral Cowboy is a hard name to say to start with, but it's a game that I think it gets the best approach to doing puzzle games. So a lot of the problem with a lot of puzzle games is that they have one defined solution, and so most of the time your goal is to try and find that one solution. And once you get it, you do it, you win. And you know, that can be fun and rewarding, but that also has the risk of being a bit annoying when you sit there stuck on a puzzle for a little while, and you know, you can sort of just get a bit frustrated by the experience. What they've done with Quadrilateral Cowboy is to try and make a game that's more about problem solving. Your goal is to do this, but there's several different ways that you can approach it, which is typically the better way to go about it, I find, because it allows your creative solutions and alternative thought processes come in and, you know, shake up how you approach a problem. So the idea behind the game is that you are a group of criminals planning out heists. So you have to break into a facility or steal from a moving truck or something. But the gimmick is that you're actually planning out these heists in a virtual world, in kind of like a Pentium computer era. So it's like really basic kind of computer graphics. So it's got this weird like retro cyberpunk feel to it, which is an interesting sort of idea. But you get all these bits of equipment and you have to sort of code up the solutions for those equipments to work. So you might have like a gun, and then you need to program it so that it will rotate 45 degrees and shoot, and then wait 3 seconds and then rotate again to shoot again. You can like create these little scripts for each of your components to run so that you can have that shoot that glass disable the alarm for 3 seconds as you run through, move up to the second floor, and just keep like building these like layered solutions towards problems. And then as you keep playing the game, you get more and more equipment, which then allows you to change up the way that you approach different problems. You can get little robots that move around levels, so you can try and get that to maneuver to the end zone. And you know, when I was looking online to see how other people approach some of these problems, there were some crazy solutions that I would never have thought of off the top of my head, but you know, the game allows for a lot of this emergent creativity with the really interesting gimmick of just having this console that you could just drop on the floor, type a bunch of commands in, and interact with the world in some way. At the end of the game, I wanted more, and I really loved the idea behind everything that the game offered.
Unfortunately, I haven't played this game, but Sam very, very kindly has got a clip from YouTube for us to look at. So we're just going to pause the podcast now, and both Ruby and I are going to have a look at that clip. Well, we're back, and Ruben and I both enjoyed that little clip Sam had for us. Mm-hmm. So, Sam, I saw the clip that you played for us. It was actually one of the ads for the game.
Yep.
And when I was watching it, I've got a couple of questions came up. Number one, do you ever see any characters in the game at all? Like, do you ever see yourself, or do you see other humans?
There's bits in between the heists that you sort of do, which you interact with two other hackers that are inside the world. There is a bit of a story around what's happening, but it's not really all that. It's just there to keep things moving along and to explain why you're getting new bits and equipment and things. And there's a couple of points where you see a mirror to see yourself as a character.
Oh, really? Okay, cool. So back way back in the day, like I'm talking about when I was a kid in primary school, we played an old game called Mystery House. I think it was on the Apple IIes. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about green screens here, right?
Yeah.
And then when we finally got an IBM computer, we played Myst.
Yep.
And this made me think a little bit of the game Myst, and that sort of go to a place, right? You know, do those text commands. Look for something, search for something else happens, and then you sort of move your way through it.
Yeah. And they've definitely brought some of the inspiration for those sorts of games into that game, into Quadrilateral Cowboy, and they've made it feel like one of those old school games, but it still has so much of the modern game design and modern feeling towards it that it is a fully fresh game.
So hang on, when you say modern game design, what do you mean by that?
Well, in comparison to something like Myst, you know, you've got an open ability to move around and interact with stuff. It's got interactable objects in the world. It's got decent looking graphics.
Rather than just like a left or right.
Yeah, pretty much. So it's a lot more open. It's rather than a lot of those old school games kind of could only ever have one solution to a puzzle, because otherwise it would be too difficult to consider everything that would happen. Whereas modern games just really understand that these games are more like sandboxes. So just make a fun, engaging set of problems. Let people loose into it and see what they do. And if they find some weird, wonderful way to get the game to not work right as they intended, but it solves the puzzle, then great.
For plebs like me and Andrew, would it be hard to pick up? It looked difficult to pick up.
I think, yeah. So, while this game was number 5 on my list, it's one that I would tentatively recommend to people. I mean, it's probably really ticked a box in my camp because it's got a bit of programming in it, and it's like, oh, I can do this sort of stuff. They explain things quite well, and there's lots of resources in the game to help you explain how to do some of these things. But I can understand that some people could pick up the game and just get a little bit frustrated by it, or not find it particularly engaging.
So for you, like the one thing that made... Now, I understand I suppose it's a little bit like when you have bosses at the end of levels. Like there's normally a few different ways, at least in a good game, to kill a boss, right?
Yes.
So, and I mean, it's not the same as a puzzle, but the boss is kind of a puzzle. And sometimes big bosses are a bit puzzly because there's lots of different things going on, right?
Absolutely.
But what's the one thing that, because you played a lot of games in 2017, my friend. Mm-hmm. What's the one thing that got this to number 5 for you?
I think the thing that really brought it home was just the novelty of it, right? Like it was something that used that sort of scripting inside of a game in a way that was genuinely... I haven't seen that done in a game before. A lot of those levels were designed quite well, that when you screwed it up and you got a little bit lost, you could start again and think about the situation a little bit more. Good level design, I guess, combined with a novel idea. And
the novel idea being in inputting the code, like scripting in the game to actually play the game.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, that sounds pretty good. Now, I believe it's the number 5 Newcastle United moment.
Yep.
Here we go.
Now, Just for our listeners, to remind people, Newcastle United are a football team who play in the English Premier League, and they come from the northeast of England.
And the English Premier League is probably the top soccer league or football league in the world.
Well, depending on when you're listening to this podcast, right now it is the richest league in the world. Whether or not that makes it the top league in the world, I don't know. But
what else can we measure on? You know what I mean?
That's right.
Cash flavour, baby.
I mean, we could measure on how many of their teams have won the Champions League, but that would be silly because the English Premier League wouldn't be up there.
Yeah. Hello to all our listeners in the UK.
Yeah. Yeah, and your national team's terrible as well, but, whatever.
Yeah, and we won't even talk about your cricket side. What the hell?
Okay. My fifth best moment of the 2017 for Newcastle United was Newcastle United beat West Ham at West Ham 3-2 on the 27th of December 2017. Mm-hmm. So pretty much the last game of that calendar year.
Was Winston Reid playing?
No, he's injured.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's why.
You go. For our listeners, Winston Reid is a New Zealand footballer who plays for West Ham. Okay, so why this got number 5 for me was it had been 9 matches without a win, and the team were plummeting towards the relegation zone. And it had actually been 2 matches without even scoring a goal.
Wow.
So Newcastle came from behind in the match and then held on to win. And this is something they hadn't been able to do pretty much all season. Plus, they scored 3 goals. So, started scoring goals again. Now, a guy called Henri Sauvé started, and despite barely featuring for Newcastle since he joined the club 3 years ago. So he spent all last season out on loan and hadn't played at all this season. So understandably, everyone feared the worst when he popped up on the team sheet.
Right.
And those worries were pretty much confirmed when he gave away the first goal. He just directly gave away the first goal. But then he went completely off script, scored an equaliser from a free kick minutes later, and after that he had a great game and helped Newcastle pick up a very, very important 3 points. Now, the postscript to this feeling of joy were the good feelings were predictably short-lived. So Newcastle went on to drop vital points against relegation rivals. This is after the match.
Yep.
And end 2017 hovering just outside the relegation zone. Now, good old Sauvé, who had a cracking game, hasn't been seen since, despite playing better than many of his midfield rivals in the team, and has subsequently left the club again on loan for the rest of the season. So, yet another case of Newcastle taking lemonade, turning it back into lemons, and then turning those lemons into shit.
I got some of those words, especially the bit with lemons and shit.
Okay. Any questions?
I think we're all good there, Andrew. We might move on to Sam's number 4 game, I reckon.
Number 4 game for the year.
Yeah.
My number 4 game is Witcher 3 by CD Projekt Red. Again, another 2015 game. In any other year, and if I was doing this list and I'm playing games a bit more up to date, this would have definitely made the best game of 2016. So the fact that they made number 4 on 2017's list was a testament to how many good games there were that came out this year. The Witcher series is a series that I was never really super into. I played the first one and got bored, played the second one and wanted to like it, but just after a few hours, just never found myself getting back to it. But when I played Witcher 3, I think they had fixed up a lot of the things that were just small niggling annoyances in the previous games, or massive annoyances in the first one. And in the end, they streamlined it down to where that core bit was fun. And they made that core bit feel really, really good. And then that just sort of made it so much easier to open it up the game, play a little bit, put it back down again. And just churn a bit of time in that world. So,
Sam, can I just ask, what was the core bit of the game?
So, in number 1, the combat for the game was largely you click on an enemy and then he starts attacking it, and then maybe you click again, and it was not really super engaging. Number 2 was a little bit better, but some of the things, because he was actually now moving around and actually attacking, clicking to attack rather than clicking on an enemy to attack. Just a little thing like that made a huge difference, but it still felt a little bit clunky. Whereas in number 3, everything, the whole movement scheme and all that they've done with, all the different control schemes feels really tight. They've learned a lot from games like Dark Souls, I think. They've taken a lot of inspiration from how those games feel really good to play. And they just made it feel a lot more engaging when you were being in a fight to have to, navigate around and be a member of the battlefield moving around rather than being kind of just, I'll move it a little bit here, and well, what's the point kind of thing. They had lots of good little hooks in the plot so that you just keep playing for a little bit, and then as you keep going, the plot for the game was actually really good. So as you get through and discover more bits, you just kind of want to see what happens, and that's the key thing that an RPG needs to do. If it can't do that, forget it, right? And I think one of the things that made it stand out a lot was there's been so many open world games, like games where you can just go into an open world and explore around and go get this thing and do that thing over there. And like Ubisoft is really bad for this, especially for having a massive open world that's just full of things to do. And you just go running around going, oh, okay, now I'm going to go to this point and stand there to get that achievement. And then I'm going to go here and kill that guy because it's what it tells me to do. And it just feels a little forced.
And when you say full of things to do, you mean full of not very interesting things to do.
Precisely. It's just things that you do because the game tells you go get the thing. I mean, that's what you want to do, right? Whereas The Witcher 3 tried to make a world filled with people and events and questions. And then that would lead to more interesting games. So you'd go to a little village, and rather than being like, oh, okay, we want you to kill a guy, there'd be a bit of a discussion. There'd be a reason behind everything, a cutscene with some, good voice acting, good character development, and then some interesting questions about what you're going to do next. So when you finish a little, they're like little stories in their own, wrapped up nice and neat. And then at the end of it, you've made some decisions, and you've made a little bit of more of an impact on that world based on how you want that world to be, I guess, in a way. So you feel more of a part of that world by making those decisions. But the decisions are always from the perspective of this character, Geralt, which is the main character of the game. And he has like a restricted limitation to what he will do because he's a character. You're playing a character. You're not playing you in the game. So it does frame your decisions in this character's viewpoint, which is very interesting in a lot of ways.
And also, you made a point of you don't get to be whatever you want to be. Mm-hmm. You are Geralt. Is it?
Yes.
You are Geralt.
Geralt with a T.
You have to do things from Geralt's worldview perspective. And there's, like you said, there's boundaries to what Geralt will and won't do.
Exactly.
Okay, I think it's about time we had a bit of a look at this game.
6 months into the invasion, Nilfgaard's legions had pierced the heart of the northern realms. Behind them, blood-soaked fields, war-swept wastes. A lone wolf roamed these broken lands, a beast slayer, a whirlwind of rage and steel. They say he was a man obsessed, chasing memories, faces, scents. Yet amidst the chaos, he could only follow his heart.
Okay, so we've just watched a very highly produced gameplay trailer.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's a trailer.
Oh no, I know, but we watched a trailer before, and I wouldn't say that was highly produced.
But then that was the aesthetic of the game as well, wasn't it?
True.
But is all that stuff in the trailer, like having played the game, is all that stuff in the trailer from the game?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask because it looked amazing.
I mean, it looks a little bit better in the trailer than it does in the game, mainly because the game has UI elements and it's more of a game in the game. But all those bits in there were bits inside the game, and all those bits in the world were real places you can visit and do stuff in.
And a good portion of that was in cutscene.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty much it. There's lots of cutscenes in the game though, because it is a lot of dialogue and lots of character development and. Yeah, but in a good way. And there's one other point that I wanted to bring up, which was that the game does something really interesting with villains. Now, a lot of games just kind of have, very two-dimensional villains. Oh, I'm evil, I'm going to take over the world kind of thing. But The Witcher did a really good job with creating villains that were unambiguously evil, but very interesting.
So hang on, when you say unambiguously evil, you mean they are evil to their core. We're talking Joseph Stalin, we're talking Hitler.
Totally. All the big boppers.
Yeah,
the big boppers.
The big bad guys.
But those two people, whilst being unambiguously evil, were also very clear why they were doing the things they were doing.
Exactly. That's exactly it. These characters, so like for instance, the crones in the game are these three old hags, because a lot of the big plot arcs of the game are actually based loosely on corrupted fairy tales kind of thing. So they've got the three crones from the famous stories of Norse and Greek mythology, and they're just these evil old gods that have just walked into this swamp and taken over it and just corrupted everything, and their visual appearance is genuinely disturbing and in a way that's just amazing. And then there's in the DLC pack, the first one, Hearts of Stone, Gaunter O'Dim is this character that is just, he is so beyond powerful that's not even funny, that if you know that if you fought him you would lose. And that's just such an interesting villain in a game like this, where, you've fought massive giant demons and beasts, and then there's this guy that just walks in who you met randomly, and he's just the biggest, most intimidating force in the entire game's universe. So how do you deal with that?
And he can't be defeated.
He cannot be defeated.
Can't be defeated.
But he can be outwitted. And that's so much more interesting than just having a guy that's got, I've got lots of health and armor, beat me up at the end.
Yeah. You have to find the special sword to kill me.
Yeah, exactly. It's just it's MacGuffin to go do with all this stuff. This guy, you're just sitting there going, what am I going to do? Well, when it gets to the end, he could just kill me. What am I like? What's going on? It's good.
So you have like a Bilbo Baggins Gollum sort of face off.
Kinda, yeah.
There you go.
But yeah, and that little bit of making those villains really interesting just made some of those bits in the game so memorable and so interesting. And it's something that I think if they didn't have that, the game would have been half as good easily.
Well, talking of villains,
Here we go.
Talking about Newcastle again.
Yes.
talking about unambiguously evil people, which would be Mike Ashley, the owner of Newcastle.
Oh.
Yeah, well, I'm not the only one who thinks that.
Yeah, well, look. Just remember, he might be listening and he could be a fan of the podcast.
Mike,
So be nice.
Mr. Ashley, if you are listening, sell the club and get out of Newcastle. You don't want to be involved, and we don't want you to be involved.
That's what I wanted. Righto, what's number 4, Andrew?
Okay, number 4 on my positive hits list for 2017 and Newcastle United. Number 4 is actually a defeat.
Well, yeah.
I mean, it's got to be, right? There's only so many wins.
Yeah, sounds like the last decade's been.
And there hasn't been many wins. Anyway, so it was a 1-0 defeat at home to Manchester City on the 23rd of December.
That's pretty impressive, though.
Yes,
City.
it is. Now, Ruben knows his stuff.
Yeah.
So, against a magnificent Manchester City team, and I'll say this now, this City team this season is one of the greatest football teams I've watched in my time. Now, We're
referencing the 2017-18 season.
Yeah, 2017-18 season. So it's not the Barcelona teams of the Pep Guardiola era or the Frank Rijkaard era, but it definitely is. It's headed towards that direction. Some of the things they've done is just.
Well, also they just seem like this year a class above the rest of the competition. Really,
that's correct.
Yeah.
And in a competition that's richer than ever, the teams. I mean, the Manchester United team, which is supposed to be challenging them, is.
It's not.
and yet, the Manchester United team is full.
Yeah.
It's one of the strongest Manchester United teams I've ever seen,
Yeah.
and I've seen some magnificent Manchester United teams.
Well, they spent a lot of money.
They
didn't
spent a heap of money. Anyway,
Heaps.
so against a magnificent Manchester City team, Newcastle not only restricted them to 1 goal, they even almost drew the match with a couple of chances at the end. The team looked more focused and more organised than they had all season, and even though it was a defeat, the team were given a standing ovation at the end of the match by the packed home crowd. The Newcastle fans, who are intelligent football fans, could see what the team had set out to do and could see how big a challenge that they had taken on, how well they'd done.
Right.
Now, it's key to note this was a Manchester City side that had flogged teams in direct competition with Newcastle in that bottom half of the Premier League table. They put 7 past Stoke, 6 past Watford, 5 past Palace, and not only that, they put 5 past Liverpool, and Liverpool were meant to be a team that could compete with Man City. So it was no mean feat that the Newcastle defence, guilty for so much of the season, for dropping points for Newcastle, was able to combat this attacking force in the way they did. Now, as always, the postscript to this is, in true Newcastle fashion, they took all that positivity and momentum from that game and in the next match turned it into a timid 0-0 draw with Brighton. Now, it's key to note that Brighton is a direct relegation candidate rival. So this is a match.
It's a game to win.
There's a term
One
for
of the only
matches like
games
this.
they can win.
That's right. Well, no,
One of the games they can.
Well, really? Like, seriously?
Yeah.
No, when you are strategizing for the season, when you have a weak team like Newcastle have, you look at the draw and you go, right,
We got to put our strongest team out on the park for Brighton because
This
it's
one-
the only chance that we might have of getting 3 points.
yeah, that's right. So it's one of the few chances we have of generally pulling in 3 points. And there's a term for matches like this, and it's called a relegation 6-pointer. the side that wins gets 3 points, but they deny
Nice,
3 points
yeah.
to a direct rival.
Right.
Yeah. And so for that reason, it was a must-win for both teams, and draw really didn't help anyone.
Yep.
And thus we got
draw.
bitter disappointment.
Right.
Yep.
Any questions?
Yeah, actually, I got a comment to make on that. You almost drew with Manchester City. Now, I did comment that was pretty good, but to bring you back down to earth, almost drews don't get you out of the relegation zone, mate.
How in the world am I not back down to earth? I'm a Newcastle fan.
yeah, okay.
We-
well,
You're
fair enough.
used to getting stomped on the ground.
Right.
The other thing I will say is your season sounds a lot like the New Zealand Warriors for the last 10 years.
For listeners at home, the New Zealand Warriors are a rugby league team in Australia.
That are an atrocity. But when they come up against the top of the table, they'll pull their finger out and upset them, and then they'll just go on a 10-game losing streak. But anyway, we're not here to talk about New Zealand Warriors. We're here to talk about Sam's number 3 game of 2017.
Number 3 is What Remains of Edith Finch, a game by Giant Sparrow. There's a lot of criticism of what people call the walking simulator game, and the best example that you've probably played of that is the Stanley Parable, a game where you sort of walk around in a world and interact with a story in some way, but there's no like real strong gameplay element. It's a bit hard to define that sort of loop. I think the genre was best typified about 3 years ago with a game called Gone Home, which was a good game, but suffered from the fact that it was just a good story in a okay kind of world, but nothing else to really bring it home. Like I played the game and I wanted to like it a lot more than I actually did. And after about a week of playing it, I just went, that game, it had an interesting story, but it's hard to justify the time investment into playing that game when it probably could have been a short story and just been just as good. And I didn't have that sense of attachment to the world like they kind of wanted me to have. So I found it hard to relate. What Remains of Edith Finch, however, is a game that takes that idea of someone returning back to a childhood home and finding out what's happened and makes it something genuinely amazing. You're basically playing this game as Edith Finch, who's, I think, 17 years old. Her family has a curse, and the curse is that they always die young and in tragic fashion. Basically, everyone in her family is dead. And so she's going back to the family house to discover what happened to everyone, what is going on with this particular curse, and to try and like figure this sort of out in her life. As you go through this old house that is kind of fantastical in some elements and kind of weird and bizarre and interesting, you basically play the last moments of every single one of her family members in these little vignettes that are quite self-contained and quite powerful and quite moving in a lot of ways.
So you play the last moments of their death?
Yes.
Goodness.
Yeah, it's quite a dark sort of game. But the thing is that like they're always told from the perspective of the people who are remaining, and there are people that believed in that curse as well. So a lot of those last moments are kind of fantastical and wondrous in a way that isn't the reality of the situation.
So they're dying, but in the classic sort of story sense, they believe that this was their destiny.
Pretty much.
Oh, okay, right.
But the thing is, each of those little individual vignettes are all a very different style. They all have a very different theme, and they do different art styles for some of them. They do different sort of little gameplay ideas for them, simple loops, and they really express a lot of a character inside these short little bits of it.
So I think we're going to have a bit of a look at this.
do
So
it.
let's pause the podcast and get on that YouTube.
I'm sure my mom was just trying to protect me. Now that there's only one of us left, I thought it was time I heard the stories. But now I'm worried the stories themselves might be the problem.
Okay, so looking at the trailer and hearing what you're saying, I mean, the trailer really didn't give much away, and I'm assuming it is I've played the Stanley Parable. I can see how this would be a way to engage with a story that isn't watching completely passive.
Yep.
But it's still not that.
It's not super active either, so it's a very accessible kind of experience. And I think the reason why What Remains of Edith Finch jumped from being a really good game to being number 3 on my list was just one single scene in the game, which was, people will know it as the cannery level. And if you talk to people who've played the game, everyone goes, yeah, that's the thing. And I think it was probably one of the most intense experiences I've ever had in a game, ever. Hands down. I was literally shaking at the end of it. Like,
Wow.
Just from how powerful the ideas and the expression of that idea was executed.
That was actually going to be my next question. Did you actually like get scared throughout playing the game?
I was never scared, but I was overwhelmed, I
Yeah,
think is
yeah,
the way
yeah,
to describe
yeah,
it.
yeah.
It was never a scary game because, you know,
Okay.
you kind of know it's written into the DNA of the game, everyone's going to die.
But there was like
Right.
an emotional reaction.
It's just the sheer sadness and
Yeah.
like of those last moments of the terrible stories that happened to these
it's
people. that-
extremely overwhelming. Yeah.
It's just it's incredible.
That's cool.
Okay, so why, when you say it's incredibly sad, okay, so I think back to a movie called Alive. Have you ever heard of a movie called Alive?
I've heard of it, but I don't think I've seen it.
Okay, so it's a movie about a South American football team that crashes in the mountains, and they have
Right.
to they end up surviving for I think 3 months or 4 months up there. They ended up having to eat some of the dead passengers. Alive is a good movie, but it's just overwhelmingly sad and
Yeah,
just
yeah.
one setback after another. And even when they get rescued at the end, it's like, well, they're rescued, and now they've got to tell everyone how they survived, which is by eating
Yeah.
the
So
dead passengers.
Yeah.
So I would never recommend anyone watch Alive, even though it's very well made and it's a true story and all this kind of stuff, because there's nothing good that comes out of it. Yet another movie which is overwhelmingly negative, but is a fantastic experience, is There Will Be Blood,
Right. Yeah.
which is, and there's nothing good in There
Yeah.
Will Be
No
Blood.
one walks out of that one.
No
alive.
one. It's a terrible grinding experience, but a wonderful, like it's just a wonderful emotional experience.
Yeah.
What about Schindler's List?
I've never seen Schindler's List.
Whoa, bro.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. I guess
Have
I'll
you?
to- Yeah. No.
Yeah, no, I watched it a few months ago, actually.
Yeah.
Devastating, but good.
Yeah. I see your point though, in that you can make a game that is just so overwhelmingly sad it loops around to being just too much.
Yeah, it's just a lot of, and Alive's like that. It's just a lot of bad luck, and you're like,
Yeah,
oh
yeah.
my god, really?
Exactly. I think Edith Finch isn't on that end. I think it's more on the There Will Be Blood kind of thing, where it is overwhelming. It is quite powerful in a lot of those ideas, but the game has lots of breathing room. It gives you a lot of time to think about these things, and it is well paced in a way that doesn't make it feel like just endless horror kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I would say this about There Will Be Blood. It's great because it's so spectacular. It's
Yeah.
so incredibly spectacular and well done that even though everything is negative,
It's just an amazing experience.
It's
yeah.
amazing
I'd
experience.
say that's exactly like why I would recommend Edith Finch, which is number 3.
I just think that it's amazing how a game can give you that emotional reaction, you know? Like that's pretty powerful. That's some seriously powerful stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. 2017, I think, was just a really good year for games that made me walk away from the end of it with some greater appreciation, both of the world and end of games themselves.
Yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah.
And it's good to have a nice year where there's just so many good games.
Yeah, totally. Not a good year for football. No.
Never a good year for Newcastle.
Yeah.
well, hang on, we
Yeah.
are talking about the positive, the highlights of the season,
Yeah,
of,
yeah,
of the
yeah,
cal-
yeah.
of the calendar year.
That's why we're limiting it to 5.
That is why we're limiting it to 5. Number 3 on my Newcastle United hit list. Newcastle beat Brighton 2-1 at Brighton in the 28th of February. Now, this was the second half of the previous season. So this is when Newcastle were down in the championship.
So Brighton came up as well then.
Brighton came up as well.
Okay.
That's right. Now, this win meant a home and away win over Newcastle's direct championship title rival. Actually, Newcastle's only rival for the championship title that season was Brighton. Mm-hmm. Now, Brighton were looking for revenge from their loss at Newcastle earlier in the season, and not only that, Brighton were actually in top spot, and this result moved Newcastle within 1 point of them.
Right.
But more so, Newcastle came from behind to win a thrilling match, one in which Brighton had been on top for long periods, and it was the first proper pressure match that this Newcastle team, which had been relegated the season before, a lot of players shipped out, a lot of players came in, there was a lot of anxiety around the club Uncertainty, yeah. And Newcastle rose to the challenge. And it was probably the first time, even though they won a heap of games before this, it was the first time that, especially myself as a fan, thought, this team can do it. Like this
Right.
team, I feel like this team is coming together and it can actually face the big matches.
In the context of the season, it was a huge game, really.
Huge game. No, it was a big game. And, a really good positive step forward for a fledgling Newcastle team. Had been together about a lot of the team had only played together for about 7 months.
So it was a game that sort of reinvigorated your love of the team, I guess, in a way.
Oh, no.
No.
I
Will never die.
I know.
How many goals did they score, Andrew?
They scored 2 goals.
Well, this is Sam's number 2 game. So.
There you go.
You're welcome, boys. That's
Sam
why I get the big bucks.
Gillespie's number 2 game of 2017.
This one is Persona 5 by Atlas. Now, actually, I'm as surprised as everyone else that this game is number 2 on my list because it was a game that I was looking forward to for 7 or 8 years.
I'm very surprised this is number 2 on your list because we met up for a coffee months and months ago and you were just raving about this game.
And it is excellent by all accounts. But yeah, just again, surprising games of you'll have to wait and listen to find out what number 1 is. But no. So the Persona series, I was a fan from number 3 and played number 4 as well. And the idea behind these games is that they're set in Japan and you're playing as a Japanese high school student. And it sort of blends 2 worlds in these games. One which is the mundane, regular life of a high school student. And the second one is this weird and wonderful, bizarre, fantastical adventure. It's a simple idea, but the thing that makes it step apart from a lot of your traditional kind of cliche kind of fantasy games is they focus a lot on the idea of Jungian philosophy. So the idea that everyone has a collective unconscious that influences the world around them, that everyone has a shadow or a darker side to themselves.
You're talking about the psychologist Jung.
Psychologist Jung, yes.
Oh,
yeah.
goodness.
So it just kind of like builds this positive. What if it's all true and it's all in this weird fantasy side world? But then it builds on top of that with strong characters and strong motivations. So, I mean, from number 3 and number 4, that was really interesting and really well done. But, you know, they were PS2 era kind of games and they had lots of needless grind and they had lots of flaws. But I love them anyway because they told a good story. Especially number 3. The ending of number 3 is, I think, one of those just genuinely amazing moments at a game where you just put it down and go, wow, that was something. Didn't care for Persona 4 as much, but there's still a lot to like, and they really fixed up a lot of those mechanics. And they keep the same sort of mechanics throughout the entire games, and when they get to the 5th one, it's just, they've polished everything that they've done in those previous systems and made them 10 times better, right? Like, everything flows a lot more smoothly, everything's a lot more interesting. The central core of the game is the idea that of the fantasy world kind of game, is that you're collecting these personas and their different attributes and different like mythological beings and all these sort of collective unconscious characters from folklore kind of thing that you gather up and use their abilities. But you can then sort of with the system fuse them together and get more powerful ones and kind of rig their attributes and abilities together to create stronger and stronger monsters. Yeah, it's a weird like Pokemon kind of thing in a way. It's a very weird game. Like, don't get me wrong, Persona is just famous for being a very weird series. But, yeah, sorry.
Okay, so I think we're going to have a look at this
look.
because, okay, let's pause the podcast and do our thing.
You are truly as he anticipated. This is truly an unjust game. But if my voice is reaching you, I beg you, please overcome this game and save the world.
I'll navigate your
So, we just watched the trailer,
Yep.
and I'm going to say that I've watched a fair bit of anime
Yep.
in my time, and I've disliked most anime.
That's fair.
Now, some of the things I most enjoy that I've ever watched in terms of movies or TV series is actually anime. I see actually Ghost in the Shell, first gig and second gig are
Fantastic.
the equal of The Wire. Like,
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
the equal of The Wire. So they are just so good. Another example would be the Neo Genesis stuff, which is weird, but it's a crazy good, right?
It goes places.
It goes places, right? But my main problem with that kind of stuff, for the majority of stuff which gets recommended to me at times, is that it's just not very emotionally developed. Like it's very much not even the last years of high school. It's almost like
It's a bit kiddie.
Yeah,
It's a bit kiddie, yeah.
Super fun, cool.
Yeah, and like there's the whole genre of things like Lucky Star where it's just needlessly cute and in high school sort of just fake in a weird way that's just not super enjoyable.
It's fine if it's like, for example, something like Astro Boy was actually quite emotionally deep.
Yeah.
Without going over the top and making a big deal of it or being that adult.
Yeah, right. I think that Persona 5, when you look at it, it kind of looks a bit like a lot of other things that are kind of, it's a high school kind of drama and everyone's a high school student. The Persona series does is quite famous for doing quite strong characters and good character development in the game. There's a lot of little subplots that you can go to spend more time with characters, find out more of their story and develop them. And there are some really good characters inside Persona 5. There's a couple of kind of mediocre ones that are just sort of, didn't get fully fleshed out. I don't know what, development processes, right? Maybe a story just didn't get the love that they wanted, but there's still so much in the game that was a really interesting and enjoyable experience and some really strong characters in general. And I don't know, I found it a very enjoyable experience.
So I want to bring up another anime that actually is the only anime that my wife has watched with me ever and enjoyed, right?
Shout out to Andrew's wife.
Yeah. Shout out, Jules.
Yeah.
I love you, baby.
There you go.
So
I just got you laid, son.
yeah, no, I'll tell Jules that when I get home.
You won't have to tell her. She's a listener, obviously.
She's a listener to the podcast.
It's a reward. It's a surprise for you in a few weeks.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm going to reference Death Note here.
Death Note, yeah.
So Death Note did something where they took a high school genre of something and they walked you into something deeper. Because, and especially with, now I forget her name, but Light's girlfriend.
Oh, you're really pushing my
I know.
limits.
Katsuragi. Mia. Yeah, maybe it's Mia. Yeah. So she starts out and you're like, oh my God, in these interesting deep characters, you bring this. Like you bring a very shallow, but no. She goes deep. And they sort of trick you with it because she has the look and the draw and the appearance of everything, all the shallow characters you've ever seen before in these things.
Yep.
And then by the end,
Exactly.
Yeah. By the end, and even before then, little ticks, little things. You're like,
actually, maybe there's something going on. Yeah.
So exactly. is that maybe similar to? Because what I saw on that clip you played us was exactly everything I don't like. Right. But is there that kind of thing happening where it's like it's leading you in with the promise of this, but actually once you get a hold of some of these characters, they start to turn and just spiral in.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of depth to a lot of the characters that when you start to spend more time with them, you realize that they're not these two-dimensional kind of cardboard cutouts that they're made out to be. I don't know if there's any character example that would be as well developed and well done as something like Death Note.
Yeah.
And that was a great example of really good character development. I don't know if it's that good, but at the end of the day, the world and the story and the fantastical setting of it really carries a lot of in a lot of the plot as well, right?
The only comment I have to add is it reminded me of that game. I can't remember. I've been trying to think of the name of it for the last few minutes. It was on Xbox, and you're a rollerblader, and you had to rollerblade around a city and tag stuff.
Oh, Jet Set Future?
That's the one.
Yeah, that was it.
I knew that.
That's
I knew Jet Set Future.
The guy who's not into games.
Yeah. See, because I picked
I don't
up...
know, the end game, when I saw some of the end game footage, it just reminded me of that. I don't know, it just triggered a memory. But it's probably nothing like that, so...
Yeah, well, another thing about it is that what you saw in there with all the, lots of really cool, crazy transitions and effects and all that sort of stuff, that's just gameplay footage. A lot of that is driven into the game. So the game has this absolutely amazing art style throughout the whole thing, and it's got a really jazzy feel to a lot of that. It's a game that's fun to explore menus, which is something I've never seen in a game before.
Well, there was one prototype once upon a time.
We won't talk about that one.
Okay, number 2 on the hit list for 2017 Newcastle United moments. Newcastle beat Preston North End 4-1 at home and are promoted to the Premier League.
Huzzah! Woo!
Hey, it was a thumping result in front of a packed St James's Park. After all the misery of relegation the previous season and the frustration of another disappointing January transfer window when the team did not reinforce and the coach, Rafa Benitez, was desperate to reinforce the team, Newcastle bounced straight back to the Premier League with still 2 games to play.
Who'd they beat?
They beat Preston North End.
Who?
we are
Preston North End. We are Preston. Any Preston North End listeners?
Was it a guy named Preston that they beat?
I hope there's some Preston North End supporters tuning in. Send us a comment or an abusive message.
Yeah, give us.
I'd love to hear from you guys.
Yeah, give us a review. Give us a review. Give us something.
Yeah.
Rafa Benitez, the Newcastle manager, had delivered on what he promised: automatic promotion, and that meant the fans were spared the Russian roulette nerves of a championship playoff. which, just for the listeners, so the top 2 teams are automatically promoted, but the next 4 teams go into a sudden death semi-final, then final playoff. The semi-finals are home and away, so that's 2 matches, and then there's a final at Wembley.
I reckon the listeners that don't know football probably don't care. Just a thought. Like, you're explaining it like...
this whole concept is pretty flawed, putting a podcast about football and games in the same one.
For the non-football fans, we don't care. Get back to the games. They're probably fast-forwarding right now.
Okay, well, great. Fast forward all you want. This is my time, and this is what I'm doing. Okay. Now, the season had been up and down due to the team not being strong, and the last time Newcastle had been relegated, which was a couple of seasons beforehand,
Sounds like they get relegated a lot.
No, well, recent times they have. Anyway, but last time they were relegated, they actually went down with a very strong team, so they just strolled their way through the championship.
They sucked.
Yeah, they were a weaker team. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's another
way of saying sucking. Yeah.
But look. The celebrations were huge at St James's Park, and I mean the team had set out to do what it set out to do. And yes, last time that they've been in the championship, they won it by a record number of points. They won it with like 6 or 7 games to go, smashed everyone, and then roared back up in the Premier League. This time, been a lot harder, and the celebrations from the fans were a mixture of relief, a big part relief, as well as a joy of success. And Newcastle belong in the Premiership, belong in the top league. They're actually one of the biggest clubs in England.
They do. You're right. They do.
So yeah, there we go. That was now. Listen, since it's the opinion has been put forward that listeners will be fast forwarding through the podcast.
It's just a theory.
It's a theory, and a lot of fun has been made of Newcastle top 5 moments of 2017. How about I do the number 1 Newcastle top moment of 2017 now, and we finish off
with a game.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
Just make it quick.
Make it quick, like a Newcastle team losing.
Make it quick, like they stay in the Premier League. They're like a yo-yo. They're up, they're down, they're up, they're down.
Newcastle United are not a yo-yo club, okay?
They are so a yo-yo club. In modern day football, they are a yo-yo club. A pro-yo, but still a yo-yo.
Listen, there is an expression that goes, one swallow a summer does not make. And 2 relegations in 5 years a yo-yo club does not make. Maybe it does.
Yeah, it does.
Look,
it sounds like a good definition.
Well, it
to me.
sounds like 2 from 5 is almost 50%, right? That's 40%.
Yeah, okay.
So they've been up and they've been down, and they've been up and they've been down. Now, what does a yo-yo do, Andrew?
Okay, let's just move forward. Let's just move forward. Like Newcastle.
All right, here we go. Number 1. This is it. This is the big one.
Number 1, 2017. Number one. My top moment of 2017 for Newcastle United was Newcastle win the championship in May by beating Barnsley at home 3-1. Now, it was a really close run contest between this and Newcastle getting promoted. It's testament to the importance of the Premier League that the celebrations for promotion often outshine the celebrations for winning the actual league.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the end, Newcastle winning the championship takes top spot because of the way it happened. Going into the final day of the season, Newcastle were in second place and needed Brighton to slip up to have any chance of winning the league. Now, on the last day of the season in all the leagues, all the matches are played at exactly the same time.
Yeah,
Right.
which is really cool.
Which is really cool
Yeah.
because you can have situations, and especially around relegation, where all the teams, where there'll be 3 or 4 or 5 teams actually in danger of being relegated that
Right.
season. But very rarely do you get to the last day of the season and actually have the championship in play.
Right.
It happened a few years ago when Manchester City first won it.
It did, yep.
Yeah.
And
So-
it was super exciting, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
Oh, yeah.
It was
spectacular.
crazy. Yeah.
Right.
Last day of the season. So normally games are played over the Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Last day of the season, everyone plays. It kicks off at exactly the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So Newcastle go into it in second place and need Brighton to slip up to have any chance of winning the league. Now, Newcastle did their job by easily beating Barnsley and looks set for second place as Brighton had been leading against Aston Villa, the team they were playing, the entire match.
Yep.
Then, in extra time, Villa score
Right.
in the Brighton match, thus drawing the game and handing the championship to Newcastle. And of course, it was really cool because Newcastle match didn't have as much extra time. So Newcastle players were actually still standing on the field waiting with, people relaying messages to them and the fans.
Right.
Everyone was just in the stadium waiting to hear the result of the match. And when the result came through, you had, of course, the cheering and celebration when they won the match against Barnsley, but everyone knew the real game was happening over at Brighton and Villa, and everyone's just waiting around the stadium, and the news filters through, and you start to see it sort of erupt around the stadium as people phoned out on their phones, and the whole place goes bananas.
It does sound pretty cool.
It was.
Was it at home? Was it a home?
Yeah, it
game?
was a home game. So it was at St James's Park. So it was even more enjoyable because there was no pressure on Newcastle. Promotion had been secured, and the result was largely out of their hands. It was Brighton's to lose. Now, in fairness, both Newcastle and Brighton had been swapping the lead of the league between them all season, and just as one would look like they were going to open up a lead at the top of the table, they would slip up and the top spot would be handed the other. Mm-hmm. If I'm being honest, if the season had another couple of matches to play, I wouldn't have been surprised to see Brighton crowned champions because Newcastle had handed it to them.
Yep.
Straight after the match reports started circulating that upper management of Newcastle had promised there would be significant money made available for player transfers before next season. Now, Rafa Benitez, the manager of Newcastle, had been very vocal about needing to add to the squad and had tried to do so in the January transfer window, but had been told the club would wait for the summer, start of next season, to bring in those transfers. However, these promises came to very little, and in the end, there were very few additions to the squad that Rafa had been telling upper management for at least 6 months would struggle in the Premiership.
Yep.
So it would come to pass, Newcastle will end up in real danger of relegation come mid-season, this season we're currently in, having racked up the worst run of results at St James's Park at home in Premier League history.
Right.
Yeah, Newcastle's setting all kinds of records for the wrong reasons.
Bad records.
So the club continues with this roller coaster life of exhilarating highs, terrifying lows, and very, very little in between.
So I've got one question for you, Andy. Why aren't you a fan of a better team?
Good question.
Because life is struggle.
Speaking of life is struggle, that makes me think of my number one game.
Sammy G's number one game of 2017. Take it away, kid.
This would be Nier Automata, developed by Platinum Games. I don't even know where to begin with Nier because it is a bizarre game. It's a game that you could never imagine if someone came up to you and said, "Here, make a game," and you made up 1,000 ideas for games that would never even remotely approach the idea. And it starts off with a kind of simple premise. It's in the future as androids and they're trying to fight machines, right? It's a simple idea. The thing about it is the Earth has been taken over entirely by these machines. They're just dumb robots that will just attack anything on sight and group up and attack whatever they see. And so all the human beings are totally living on the moon and not dead, like absolutely. And you're playing as their android strike force to go back to the Earth and destroy the machines and make it inhabitable for humans again.
When you say dumb machines just getting up to... So I think of when you say the machines have taken over the world, right? I think of Matrix and I think of Terminator.
Yep.
But in both instances, they're not dumb machines.
Right.
They're actually quite... The reason that they were either enslaved the humans or had almost wiped out the humans is because they were smarter than the humans.
Yeah. In this case, it just comes down to the fact that they can, just beat up humans, right? Like, sometimes it doesn't need to be particularly smart if all its ideas is to just attack. And if they keep reproducing and replicating and making more machines, then they're going to win. And it's, they're just pretty silly, dumb machines. So you're playing as these androids, who are also kind of machines, fighting against these other machines on Earth to bring back the humans, which it's very strongly hinted at the very early of the game that they're probably not real because all you hear from them is a recording that's the same recording every time. Or slightly edited each time.
And this is a recording from the human masters.
From the humans, yes. From the person on the moon, totally legitimately.
Oh, like Doormat out of Mr. Squiggle.
Yeah, pretty much. Which is a very Australian reference that no one else will get.
Okay.
But yeah.
Continue on.
But the thing is that that idea of, all the humans are dead, that's just like a small little, that's a side. You think it's going to be this big twist later on, but it's, it's barely even really brought up. It's just, this is just the fact of life. But the game goes on a lot of these ideas and exploration of a lot of philosophical concepts. And a lot of people criticized it for picking up an idea and just throwing it away because, it didn't really do anything with it. But when you think about it, a lot of philosophy is built on the idea of human beings and, the rules that we set out to understand the world that we live in don't really apply when there's no humans and you only have androids that were built by humans. Like, what does the philosophy of an android need to be?
Hang on. I'm confused. Let's watch the trailer.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
so
Hang on.
Us dumb.
I might simplify this back down and just quickly talk about the gameplay itself. You're playing as androids, you go around, you beat up monsters. It's a kind of hack and slashy game. It feels very fun and it's very interesting. The first bit of it just seems kind of straightforward and simple, cool little action pieces, and then the second bit of it is just crazy nonsense where you just look back at it and go, wait, what was all this about? And the more you think about it, the more you realize just how clever it is.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Let's do it.
gameplay trailer time.
So, I mean, it's a game that I find really hard to talk about to people that don't play a lot of games because it's
Like us.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, hang on. You've brought at number 5 was Quadrilateral Cowboy.
Yes.
Now you said about that game that it was a hard game for people who aren't gamers.
Yes.
Okay, is this a hard game for people who aren't gamers in the same way?
No. This game, I think you could legitimately give to someone who hasn't played a lot of games.
We could pick it up.
You could pick it up.
Yeah.
It's quite an easy game to play, and the depth in the gameplay is pretty naturally evolves, and it's pretty easy to get into. But yeah, it's so unlike most other games, and it has these moments inside the game where you're just sitting there going, "What's going on? What is this? What is this game?" It's just such a bizarre game.
Is it the story that is making it what's making you?
So I mean, I'm also trying not to be super spoilerific.
Well, yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to probe.
No, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
So in Quadrilateral Cowboy, it was the mechanic of scripting. So you played puzzle games before. You'd even played games that were good puzzle games. So you had many different ways of solving it.
Yep.
But the scripting took it to another level for you,
Yes.
right?
So what took Nier to the other level was I looked back on it and said, the soundtrack for it, I think, is one of the best soundtracks I've heard in any game ever. It's one that I just listen to in my day-to-day life, and it's just a great soundtrack to just get things done to. It's just so powerful and emotive. The characters inside the game are really interesting and really developed in how they tell the story inside that game universe. It does a weird thing where it ends halfway through the game and makes you play through the game again from someone else's entire perspective until you get back up to that same point, and then it shows you the third act. And then when the third act happens, it just rewrites everything and just takes the game from a direction of just being this kind of fun, beating up robots, finding out some stuff. Ooh, that's interesting. Oh, that villain's, he's a robot. He's a machine that's a lot smarter than other people. Ooh, what's going on there? That seems interesting. And then the third act is like, yeah, no, that's all irrelevant because this, bang. And you're just like, how did I miss that? What's going on? And just the heartbreak that the game inflicted upon me and upon everyone who's played it that's loved it. It's something. It's so hard to talk about it. I guess.
Could we do this as an episode? This game.
It's a 30-hour game, so I don't know if Andy's got the patience for that.
He's not going to get through it. Yeah.
I'm probably not.
Well, you know what? I mean, to me, it sounds like a much more rewarding experience than watching Newcastle, and you watched plenty of that.
No, Newcastle has been a very rewarding experience for my
Has
life.
it?
Yes, no, definitely.
Relegation doesn't sound very rewarding.
The last time Newcastle were relegated, not the last time, but the time before, was the greatest season I've ever watched. I had the most fun ever. And actually,
so he liked losing.
No,
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Look, I'll tell you this. It actually. So, are either of you familiar with a movie called Fever Pitch?
No.
Okay, so the story of Fever Pitch is the season where Arsenal. This is before Arsene Wenger won the championship. A guy goes through a lot of things in his life, and the ups and downs of Arsenal during that season and their eventual win actually mirror the sort of the rhythm of his life, or
That's
at least
a cool
he
concept.
thinks. Yeah, it is. It's really good. It's a really good movie. You should watch it. It's a really good book too.
Yep.
That's the last relegation that Newcastle had, not last season, but about 5 seasons ago. That season actually mirrored a lot of things that was happening in my life at the time. You know, I was not in a job that I didn't really like, and I
Losing 4-0 all the time.
yeah, so and sort of, I'd been stuck in a bit of a rut for a few years, and to be honest, the Newcastle team leading up to relegation, that's why they got relegated. They've been stuck in a rut.
So you needed to get relegated in your life in order to gain new management and
it's not as
different players.
Well, actually, I
Sorry, I'm just trying to draw the analogy.
I actually had to sort of hit rock bottom.
Yeah. Well, you do.
Well, I mean, it's not that
Ask
dissimilar
a crack addict.
It's not that dissimilar where, I mean, I've played games in periods of my life where it really helped me gain a lot of perspective on things, right? Like just seeing a good story develop, and you just kind of get bonded to some games that, may not have been great games, but they were the game that you needed at that time.
Yes, that's something that's so important to touch on when we're talking about all of these things, is that it depends so much on your state of mind when you go into these things.
Absolutely.
And yeah, like you said, like you connected with the game because it came at a certain time. If you had played that game 5 years later or 5 years earlier, it may not have. You may have played it for 10 hours and gone, "This is garbage." You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And like that is so important when we're looking at any sort of art or just things that we enjoy. Like, why do we enjoy them?
Yeah. No, and look, I mean, I think something that resonates with me with Newcastle is it's a working class club. It's a big club, and more so than far richer teams like the Manchester Uniteds and the Chelseas and those kind of things. I mean, Newcastle area isn't and hasn't been for like traditionally a great area. Like it's not a place full of very rich people. It's a place full of a lot of working class.
Yep.
And for a lot of people, Newcastle is one of the shining lights in their life. And you see that in the loyalty that people have and what they get from going to St James's Park.
It's special. It's definitely a different thing to like a Man U fan or whatever,
No, and we'll have Man U fans who are like, and they'll say, we're just as passionate Newcastle fans, but
I'm just like, no, you're not though.
but I mean, like in people talk about it in Newcastle, football is a religion.
Yep.
And that's the place of worship is St James's Park. And you know what? They got relegated and were not playing well, and Newcastle were responsible for setting a new record for the number of people who watched championship matches last year. Instead of a lot of teams when they get relegated and they go down, you'll see the fans, the attendances go down. Our attendances at Newcastle actually went up. Went up. Yeah. Like it's almost like when the team needs them the most, that's when they'll show up. I mean, that said, it's almost sold out every week anyway. And there's very, very few places in the Premiership which are actually sold out every week.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Let's get back to Sam's number one game for a second.
Nier Automata.
How was this game received when it came? When did it come out?
So it came out, I'm going to say April.
Yep.
And it came out 2 weeks before Persona 5.
Okay.
And the thing is, Persona 5 was a much more anticipated game. Like, it had been in development for 7 years.
Yeah.
And it built up lots of these legacy games, so the fans were just rabid for it. And in fact, the actual creator of Nier Automata, a guy named Yoko Taro, I think, basically made a video basically saying, "Guys, you've ruined our game because now no one's going to know about us."
Yeah.
And there's like this heartfelt plea of just like, play my game, please. I know that you would have missed it in the shadow of Persona, but I'll be the first to say I missed it in the shadow of Persona because I was so looking forward and pumped for that game. And then, October was about that I picked it up and played through it. And yeah, it was just one of these ones that you got to the end of it and you just can't get it out of your head, right? You're just thinking about all those cool moments and all of those great ideas and great execution. And yeah.
So the storytelling is similarly impactful to the remains of Edith Finch?
What I would say...
What remains of Edith Finch?
Edith Finch had moments in it that were just genuinely amazing. And some bits of it that were okay, right? Like, there's some lackluster bits. Whereas once you get to that third act in Nier, it's just from there to the end, just this absolute barrage of great, like just recontextualizing so much about the game and just making you think, what's the next bit? What's going to happen next? What's going to happen to these characters? It's a game where you go from the first act of it being legitimately invincible. You're an android. If you die, they can just take your consciousness, make another android. So there's like this weird, like, dying's no consequence. Just destroy this body, teleport up over there, and you're good, right? So it creates this feeling that everything is invincible. And it just takes it all away from you in a way that's just like you just couldn't see coming. You just couldn't like imagine just how bad everything can get in 3 seconds.
Okay, there you go.
It sounds like, when you're reading like a really awesome book and you're trying to read quickly and you're almost like skipping stuff.
Yeah.
But then you're like, I can't skip the words because that's the whole reason why I'm reading the book.
book,
Yeah.
But it's like, it's so exciting and you're just caught up in the whole moment of the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So, guys, as you know, this has been a much longer episode, and we both did a fair bit of research and preparation for this.
Yeah, thank you for sticking with us for this length of time.
Yeah, I mean, and we've put a lot of effort in, so we'd like you to put some effort in. I mean, just basically no effort at all, but I feel like we're owed it. Like, I feel like you're stealing the podcast if you don't do it.
Just just maybe like a Facebook post, maybe, or
Well,
leave a review.
Leave a review for us on iTunes. Give us a rating and leave us a review. We're not asking for good ones.
Yeah,
we're just
no.
asking for reviews.
Write out that we're the rambliest podcast out there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We're not the
We're not.
Ramblers
We're
podcast
definitely
out
not.
there.
We're definitely not.
But also, you've got the SoundCloud. You get up on the SoundCloud and you give it some, you give it some of the hearts, and you subscribe to our SoundCloud feed, and then everyone knows about the YouTube, and also share it on social media. Like, we've got SoundCloud tracks, we've got YouTube tracks, we've got iTunes. Share those things, and get on the Facebook. Get on the Facebook because I'm a traditional.
Facebook.
Get on
Because
the Facebook.
It used to be called the
Facebook before Justin Timberlake came along and said, "Drop the."
Justin Timberlake playing.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway.
Wow.
So anyway,
but in my mind, it's Justin Timberlake. I'm like, Justin Timberlake did Napster? What?
follow us on Facebook and recommend us to your friends.
And you know what? You know we're good people because I'm looking at Andrew and he gave blood today.
I gave blood today.
Yeah.
What a lovely guy.
Yeah. So while you're out there doing that, go give some blood as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give some blood.
It's such a good thing to do.
Yeah.
You'll feel real wholesome.
Even though you won't be whole anymore.
But you'll be giving whole blood.
Exactly.
Holla! So
Leave a comment, leave a review, like us on
and
social media, and
share the hell out of the podcast. Share.
and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Thanks again for listening.